So, first of all, welcome all of you. Welcome to patients, advocates, clinicians, NGOs, industry, all of you. Welcome to this, let's call it a family gathering. I am so happy to be able to host this. It's very important for me, and it is important for all of us. I know this. My name is Stine Bosse. I am the vice chair in the SANT, or the Health Committee, and I belong to the Renew group. You can see that this is our group room. And we are also, as Renew people, very, very happy to host you here. We need to do a lot. We need to improve a lot of things. We need to work close together. And I am determined, together with, where is Vlad? Vlad is here, my Renew colleague, who is actually the coordinator in SANT for Renew. And he and I have worked together on, amongst others, especially this agenda. And I know it is also of big concern for Vlad that we actually do something, not just talk, but actually do things together. My co-host, MEP Adam Yarubas, is unfortunately not well, so he will not be able to be here. We wish him all the best from this room, and we wish to see him back soon. So, I want to tell you a personal story, because some of you might ask yourself, if you look at my CV, you know, what is this businesswoman, first time elected to the European Parliament, and why is she suddenly involved, not only in SANT, but especially also concerned about rare diseases? So the story is the following. About 8 years ago, my daughter, youngest daughter, was then 32, and she had 2 young children. And she had a virus that went into her brain. That is not a normal thing happening. Normally you have this part of the brain that would sort of keep out viruses. But in this unfortunate situation, the virus actually went into the brain. Now, remember, this was before COVID. So there was not a lot of research. There was not a lot of talks about what is virus and what happens if virus actually enters the brain. Nothing. And you might imagine that a country like Denmark would be specialized in everything and have access to everything. But the situation was the following: nothing. Nobody knew anything about this. Nobody could actually tell what was wrong. She kept having very, very severe headaches. She was dizzy. She had tinnitus. She was very, very poorly. And you can imagine, as a mother, and there were 2 young children, how devastating this was. And then I sat down and Googled. And I Googled for something like 12 hours, nonstop. And I found, even in Danish language, a precise description of what had happened to her. And she took this to the doctor in the biggest hospital in Copenhagen. And he said, "Oh, sorry, this is what the problem is." And then I got very worried and upset. And I started to really investigate, and I found out that in Germany and in Sweden, this was a known diagnosis. This was a known phenomenon, and there was help to get. And at the end of the day, I found a hospital in Denmark, a private hospital, and I took everything I knew, also from the hospitals in Sweden and in Germany, and I sent it to them, and I said, "Can you help my daughter?" And they said, "Yes, we can." And she got help. She will never be completely well again, but she's definitely okay. And she's definitely capable of what was, of course, very important, to be a mother. But that brought me on to the feeling of, if you know there is a treatment, if you know there is a possibility, but you cannot access it, as a parent, young parent, or grown-up parent, doesn't matter. You want to get it. And then when I was campaigning for becoming a parliamentarian here in the European Parliament, I was looking for people who had that same situation, because I wanted to understand, was I the only one who had gone through this? And of course, you know well from your own experience and for all the knowledge that is together here today in the room, that there are hundreds, thousands, millions of people in Europe with exactly that experience. And a lot of you much more serious and severe than what I have experienced. But still, the emotion, help is there, but I cannot access it. This is why I am passionate about this area. This is why I really think that we together must make a difference. I'm very pleased also that today here with us is Sebastian. Sebastian will join us later in a panel. And Sebastian has, and I won't take your story away from you, but he has personal experience exactly with rare diseases. And on top of that, he also has experience from the finance ministry in Denmark. And it has to come together. We have to talk about also that elephant in the room about what does it cost? And how do we actually make sure that we get people to understand that it's much more expensive not to do anything than to do things together? And remember the word together, because that is the key word in that sentence. And I know well that you would go through fire, water, you would climb any mountain to get to help. And I'm quite sure, because I have been interviewing a lot of people in Denmark, and I have met several of you also here, that you don't care whether it happens in Copenhagen, in Madrid, in Paris, or where it happens, as long as it happens. And that is also a thing to bear in mind when we talk about this. So now, as a full-fledged policymaker, this is a guiding principle for me, that we actually, even in the dire straits that we are finding ourselves in right now in Europe, even in that situation, we must never forget the most vulnerable of the vulnerable. That has to be part of the DNA of being European. That is getting help to our citizens. When we know it is there, it is our obligation to make sure it gets out there. And that is also why it is so important that we are also inviting industry. Industry is part of solving all this. Industry is part of making sure that we earn money, that we have workplaces, that we can compete, and that we have access for our citizens to medicines. That is at the core of what we're trying to achieve right now. So, we all know, or at least some of us had read about the fact that Mr. Trump's USA has now really canceled rare diseases with the FDA. And that we, of course, can be very disturbed about and say, what is this? And this is terrible. And it is. It is terrible. But it also has to be translated directly into a possibility for Europe to act. And that is what I'm also trying to push for. I'm also a sub-member of the Budget Committee, and I have the Budget 26 as a shadow rapporteur. And I can promise you, and Vlad knows this, I have tabled a long amendment on health. And my mission is to get at least the money that was taken out back in the 26 budget, hopefully even more. With those remarks and with a warm welcome, thank you very much for coming. I'm looking forward to listening in to the whole session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, MVP Bose, for your comments. And thank you so much for sharing your experience with us. And I think what it shows is that it's not rare to be in a situation that we all have, so many of us in this room today have found ourselves in. It is real. And the more we hear the stories, the more we feel that solidarity and that community, which is so important and emblematic of Rare Disease Day, which we are here today to celebrate and to mark in this lovely building here at the European Commission. So a big welcome to you from Eurordis. My name is Avril Daly. I am the president of Eurordis, and I am deeply honored always to represent patients and their needs and their values as we work on democracy in action, as we see out in the main plaza of the Commission building today, and to welcome those of you at home who are unable to join us today. You're also very welcome, and we're looking forward very much to the panel discussion. So we want to thank the European Parliament Intergroup on Cancer and Rare Diseases for their commitment to Eurordis and to our community, and to thank you, MEP Mboze, and also, of course, to Adam Yarabas, who unfortunately can't be with us today, but has been incredibly supportive, as have so many of you on that very important committee. It's a really important opportunity for us with a new commission to promote the reality of rare diseases, the needs of rare diseases. And I think something you said yesterday, where, you know, we can do things cheaper and smarter. We can use joined up thinking. And that's why it's so important to have people in the room that are coming from those various stakeholder groups that can work together and find solutions. It's not always about money. It can be about using the smarts that we have as a community and to face the challenges that we will encounter. But, you know, those of us living with rare diseases, that's something that we do every day. Nothing scares us. And as long as we're together and working together, that is going to get us where we want to go. And what I'd like to do is to introduce the video that was made for Rare Disease Day 2025. And this is made by people living with rare diseases to convey their particular feelings. And it's a joyful one because, you know, we always say we have to find the joy because we have to live day to day. So with that, I'd like to introduce our Eurordis video and Rare Disease Day video for 2025. Thank you.
To me, every day is a surprise.
Living with a rare disease.
It's a roller coaster.
Between happiness, tenderness, and struggle.
Getting the right specialized care
Feeling included in social occasions.
in this difficult moment
I think about all the people
that are always there to support me.
This is my day, our day,
today we can shine.
and share our stories.
So let's come together.
Because together we can do more.
More than you can imagine. Take part in Rare Disease Day.
Thank you. 300 million people are living with a rare disease globally, 30 million people in Europe, but so many voices and so many needs are the same. So it's great to have the opportunity to present that to you today and thank everybody that was involved in making it. So now I would like to introduce to you Enrico Tyrrell. Enrique is very kindly agreed to chair this session today. He has been a great supporter of rare diseases and the rare disease community for very many years within the Commission. Enrique Tyrrell's work as health councillor in the Parliament, representing, of course, Spain in the European Union and to represent the interests of Spain in the area of health. He was Deputy General Director of Quality and Health Planning at of the Ministry of Health of Spain between 2004 and 2008, in charge of the development of the Spanish strategy of ischemic heart disease, of diabetes, of mental health, and rare diseases, as well as patient safety. He has worked as a health attaché in the Spanish permanent representation to the EU and coordinated the area of health for the Spanish presidency in 2008 and between 2008 and 2011. And from 2011 to 2020, he worked as a seconded national expert and as policy officer to DG Sante, developing the legal and organizational basis for the implementation and the establishment of the European reference networks for rare diseases. And that is something that I know we've worked very closely with. And it's wonderful to see that we are now in a position where we have 24 networks that are growing day by day and year by year. So we thank him for the support that he gave us through that entire process. he has been crucial in the development of ERNs, as I have said, and between 2021 and 2022 worked as team leader in the medical service of the European Commission, and since 2022 has worked as health counsellor at the Spanish permanent representation and coordinated the health area during the most recent Spanish presidency. So thank you, Enrique, for all that you do and all that you have done for our community. And the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Avril, and thank you for your kind introduction. So I am a bit ashamed of all these words. So, but I will say just a personal note, it's very easy to work on that area because it's so clear, and as Tine presented, it's so factual, so that it's, I mean, it's not a matter of having an analysis of it's needed or not. It's very clear, no? So the problem is that we need to act together, as Tine said, no? And it's urgent to do it, no? So then, it's an honor to be moderating today's discussion, and we have distinguished panel of speakers who will share their insights on how to improve diagnosis, access to care, to treatment, and holistic care for all of those living with rare diseases. We will start with two distinguished panelists to set the scene on what we are addressing on rare diseases. Our first speaker is Adela Odryhoka from Rare Diseases Czech Republic, who will share a personal story on the journey through rare diseases, presenting key figures from the This Rare Barometers survey. Please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. I stand before you today on behalf of the rare disease community as one of the 30 million Europeans who experiences every day what it means to live with a rare disease. Living with a rare disease shapes every aspect of your life. It's not just a journey, it's an odyssey filled with barriers, more than you can imagine. For starters, it takes an average of 5 years to receive a diagnosis in Europe. For many young people and women, the journey is even longer, and in my case, it took over a decade. I spent my adolescent years in front of my computer, researching and reaching out to healthcare providers from different countries, trying to literally save my own life as my condition progressed rapidly, yet adequate support never came. The care that I have now is entirely the result of my own initiative, and it was only last year, after nearly 20 years of relentless searching, that I finally accessed what we could call a glimpse of healthcare support, but social support never came. I have never been officially recognized as a person living with a disability, which prevents me from receiving the assistance and the support I need, and it significantly, of course, impacts the quality of life. Sadly, my experience is not unique. I'm not an isolated case. And yet, after all of these challenges, I consider myself lucky to be standing here today, because for some in my community, this long diagnostic odyssey was fatal. So imagine being a child whose symptoms are misunderstood, or an adult who has spent years being told that it's all in your head. It's a phrase that I heard more times than I can count, and it's one of the main reasons my journey to diagnosis took so long. Meanwhile, we are missing opportunities for early intervention and to provide us with appropriate support. And the prolonged search for answers takes a toll not only on our physical health, of course, but on our emotional well-being, financial stability, and social participation. While too many still encounter these diagnostic odysseys and delays due to limited awareness among healthcare professionals and to limited or inaccessible diagnostic tools, we do know is that when people are referred to center of expertise, they are diagnosed faster. So strengthening European collaboration in diagnosis, especially in newborn screening, genetic testing, and European reference networks can make a real difference for everyone to access timely and accurate diagnosis, regardless of where they live. So even once a diagnosis is finally received, of course, it's a huge relief, as we've heard here today. But another set of challenges emerges because only 6% of rare diseases have causal treatment. And so more than 1 in 5 people with rare diseases do not get the treatment they need because it's not available in their country. And that leaves most people, like me, with little more than symptom management. So limited research, cost of treatments, disparities in healthcare systems, and complex reimbursement processes create significant barriers to accessing treatment. And addressing these treatment gaps and inequalities requires a coordinated European approach, one that promotes research, ensures affordability, and involves those with rare diseases in shaping solutions. But access to treatment is only part of the story because living with rare disease is about so much more. It's about quality of life, it's about dignity and independence. 8 in 10 people with rare diseases also live with disabilities, and many, like me, live with invisible, dynamic, or multiple disabilities. And yet, our disabilities are often not adequately recognized, as I mentioned in the beginning, making it difficult to access the right support, to overcome barriers in public spaces, education, and employment. And let's not forget that the impact extends beyond the person with the rare disease. Family members are often the informal carers, mothers, fathers, siblings, spouses, sons, and daughters who walk this odyssey alongside us, supported us in countless ways, and friends, classmates, colleagues to play a crucial role. And while we go through this journey, 70% of people with rare diseases and family members are forced to reduce or stop professional activity due to gaps in care and support, facing additional economic and social vulnerability and isolation. It's thus unsurprising and yet shocking that the rare disease community is 3 times more likely to experience unhappiness and depression than the general population. So we really must rethink how we approach care and support. We need a person-centered, lifelong, and multidisciplinary care that integrates health, social, and community services, because rare disease should never mean exclusion from education, work, and social participation. And despite all the challenges that we just mentioned, there is hope. Progress is possible. And the very fact that we are gathered here today shows that people with rare diseases are on the EU agenda. The policymakers, industry, healthcare providers, researchers, and services are coming together with the rare disease community, with us, to find solutions. And European cooperation has already improved access to diagnosis, cross-border expertise, and treatment. And we must continue building on these successes and implementing further policies and services that ensure that no one is left behind. And it's exactly for all of these reasons that we need the European Action Plan on rare diseases. So as I conclude, let us all remember that rare diseases are more than a medical condition. They are a daily reality for millions of people and their families across Europe. They are a daily reality for me, with most of the challenges I face being invisible to those around me. And so our experiences, our rights and hopes must be reflected in European policies and actions. So we very much look forward to today's discussions as we are still in the first year of the Parliament's mandate, ensuring that this impact is acknowledged and integrated into policymaking, especially when designing solutions for all citizens, including the most vulnerable, as we heard today as well. So today we will provide a glimpse of potential solutions, but our work does not stop here. We must continue these discussions to refine and solidify them into concrete policies, legislations, and financial commitments. And, you know, I very often say we are not asking for miracles. We are asking for commitment and for change. And together we can make sure that those living with rare diseases have the care, support, and equal opportunities we deserve, because together we can achieve more than we can imagine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adela, for your, I would say, very didactic and comprehensive approach to this, no? And through the experience of a patient, no? Which is really the best check of the system. So now let me introduce you Tim Wilson. Tim Wilson is Vice President at Charles River Associates and will present the key figures related with all we are suffering around rare diseases, the diagnosis, misdiagnosis, the delays, the gender inequalities, and also the economic toll and everything that needs to be better and analyzed through more and better developed economic studies. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Enrique, and thank you for the invitation to present today at this event. So what I'm going to do over the next 7 or 8 minutes is just take you through some of the highlights, the key findings from a report on the economic cost of living with a rare disease across Europe. So it's the economist or the finance perspective that Stina was talking about earlier on. This is the report that was sponsored by Alexion. It was also contributed by many experts in rare diseases, some of which are in the room today. So thank you for everyone who contributed to this report. If we go to the next slide, Rachel. There are already studies, there are many important studies that have been done on the economic cost of rare diseases. They've tended to focus on one rare disease, or they've tended to focus across rare diseases in one country. This is one of the first studies that's looked across Europe, looked across markets, and looked across rare diseases, trying to bring this together in some sort of holistic view. So the objective was to shine some more evidence on the issue, quantify where we can the economic impact, or at least quantify the factors determining the impact on patients, on their families, on caregivers, and the healthcare system and the economy. So this was taking quite a wide prism in terms of economic impact. So it was an ambitious study, and I'm sure there's more to be done in the future. It focuses on 9 countries. So it was ambitious, but we couldn't focus on every country. So we're drawing conclusions from a survey, a patient survey, and included caregivers across 9 different countries. This includes larger markets and smaller markets. It includes markets from the north, south, west, and east of Europe. So we hope this gives an evidence base that we can extrapolate from and draw conclusions from, even though it's only a focus on 9 markets. We focus on 43 diseases. That seemed a lot when we were doing the study, but clearly there's many, many rare diseases, 7,000 to 8,000. So it's focusing on the larger diseases, the more common diseases, and we need to take that into account. But it is giving us a good cross-section of diseases that are genetic in source, diseases that have higher or lower prevalence while still being a rare disease, or diseases that have an effective treatment, as Adela suggests, and including some that don't. So we were trying to include a range of different diseases that we can understand from them, while also being able to aggregate these together and draw some general conclusions. So as well as drawing on some rare disease experts, we used a patient survey was the primary instrument, and then we did 45 interviews with clinicians across the markets to really understand the healthcare side of this as well as the patient perspective. So we're trying to bring all of these together in the same study. If you move to the next slide, what do we find? Well, it's an economic study, so you're going to end up with an economic estimate of the impact of rare diseases. We find this is around 250 billion euros per year. What do we do with that number? It's a big number. How do we conceptualize that number? Well, first, the caveat. This is what we can quantify, and I'll talk about some of the components of that. But the biggest impact of rare disease is on the quality of life, as Adela suggests. That's unquantifiable. We have to hear the patient's story. So these needs to be seen together. The economist story and the patient story need to come together when we think about policy making. But from the finance perspective, we're talking about 250 billion euros a year. What do we do? What do we compare that with? Well, luckily, other disease areas have done similar studies. We can look at the same 9 markets. We can look at the same methodology for cardiovascular, for oncology, for neurology. And what you find is when you aggregate even a subset of the rare diseases, the ones included in our study, the impact of rare diseases as a whole is bigger than cardiovascular, bigger than oncology, bigger than neurology. So that's our first go at saying, in terms of prioritization, why are we sitting in this room? We're sitting in this room because it has a significant impact in terms of patients, caregivers, the healthcare system, the economy. We can then break this down and look at some of the components of that impact. So we can look at the direct medical costs, hospitalization, diagnostics, treatment. That's a big part of this, 74%, 184 billion. That's often the bit that we focus on. But that's only part of the story. And as Adela was already suggesting, we need to think about beyond the healthcare system to direct non-medical costs, formal, informal care, support outside of the healthcare system. That gives us another 15% or 37 billion. We also need to think about the impact on patients' lives and their participation in the economy, their impact on career progression in the labor market. That gives us another 11%, 27.5 billion. So the first finding of this report is a significant impact, and then we're often only focusing on part of the issue. There are many components of this, and we can't get too fixated just on healthcare costs, which I know the debate tends to focus on. Another way of looking at this is at the per patient level. If you look at rare disease patients living with a rare disease, and compare that to the reference group, patients living with a non-rare disease, 6 times bigger impact for rare diseases. Again, justifying why we're sitting in this room and looking at this. So the economic story completely supports the patient story that Adela was talking about earlier on. We can also look at the economic cost and the patient journey. And if we move to the next slide, please, we can start to talk about some of the things that have been captured in Eurodis's Rare Disease Barometer for many years, some of the things Adela touched upon, and we can start to link those to the economic numbers. So if we think about diagnosis, we all know the diagnostic odyssey. We all know misdiagnosis. So our survey picks up that misdiagnosis from a proportion of the patients. Of those patients with a misdiagnosis, they have a much longer time until you get to the diagnostic outcome. That leads to a much bigger cost. A cost for the patient going through that journey and all of the uncertainty that brings, but a cost for the healthcare system and indirect costs. So these things are aligned. By misdiagnosis, we're failing the patient. We're also putting a cost on the healthcare system and society. If you start to look at the relationship between diagnosis and treatment, we have some very interesting discussions with clinicians and some frustration with clinicians. And it's completely supported by the survey results. If you've actually got a regulatory approved product and effective treatment, patients are being diagnosed 4 times quicker. Until we actually have progress on the medicine side, we often don't have progress on the diagnostic side. We're again failing a whole group of patients. Where we're having a longer time to access and treatment, we have higher costs. And then my last slide, quality of life. We didn't even try to put a number on it. You can't put a number on it, but you can look at the relationship between quality of life, diagnosis, and economic cost. And what you find here is that patients who have a longer time to diagnosis have lower quality of life. Patients who have lower quality of life have higher economic costs, including indirect costs. So we can see the relationship, and this comes through whichever way you look at quality of life, and particularly the mental health aspects of this, which are very, very pertinent. So what have we found in this study? Well, we found very significant economic costs. We found we need to look at these holistically. Let's not focus entirely on healthcare costs. There's non-medical costs. There's the impact on the labor market, as well as quality of life. And we can then see that if we can actually, a faster speed of diagnosis, faster access to treatment, improves quality of life, actually reduces economic costs here. But we need to design a system that works well for the different diseases and the different patient categories. Some of the results on gender are startling in this survey in terms of misdiagnosis and costs. So we hope this study is useful, one, for prioritization, the economic part of the justification of prioritization today, but also gives us some insights into how faster access to diagnosis and treatment could reduce this economic cost as well as directly benefiting patients. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tim. Let me congratulate you because I think that we are missing exactly this type of analysis. And traditionally, the major burden, the group of diseases that represent major burden of disease were not including rare diseases, which is, I would say, personally speaking, a mistake, a complete mistake. So because that should be included as one of the major drivers of social and economic burden and used in that sense to prioritize as you mentioned. So thank you very much. And I hope that this type of studies will continue and we will have more arguments to put in front of the policymakers and politicians. So thank you to Tima and Adela. I think that their presentation gave us a very good setting of the scene. So then we will pass to the 3 sessions we will have after this initial setting the scene. And I will invite to the first session, which will address exactly what we have been discussing now, how to have an easier, faster, and more accurate diagnosis of rare diseases. Then for that, I will invite
take it from there. I think you want this to nice.
Okay, sorry for the logistic discussion. So then for this session, we have 3 speakers, Mr. Olaf Ries, Mr. Thomas Minten, and finally, member of the parliament, Vlad Voiculescu, sorry. So we will start saying that, of course, diagnosis of rare disease remains a major challenge, as has been presented already, and that on average it takes many years, 5, 6, 7, I mean, that depends, of course, of the person, could be more, could be less, but it's completely unacceptable, this delay. So, and why we have this problem? That's important to identify all the elements that we should tackle, because some of them are organizational, other are structural, other are related with using the appropriate means. So for that, I will say that we have developed in the last years some elements that will help, like by instance, the creation of Center of Expertise at national level, the creation of patient pathways, the European referral networks, but still is not working properly, and we can see the outcome of that, because the key indicator here will be the time to diagnosis. So then I will start with Mr. Olaf Ries, who is working in the Institute of Medical Genetics and Applied Genomics and Center for Rare Diseases in Tübingen. And I will ask him, can you explain how people are diagnosed currently with rare diseases and how well this diagnosis is integrated across the different layers of the system, of levels of the care?
Thank you so
The
much.
floor is yours.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm working now more than 30 years on rare diseases, and I'm deeply involved in this, and started as a scientist working on this, or as a clinician, and later became involved also on personal reasons with rare diseases, and it affects us really all. And as you mentioned, so there's a long way to go, to get the right diagnosis. And I think the EU in the last years, centuries, really made a lot of differences in this impact. And I think for all of us it's clear, and Stine Bosse made a very nice example for this, unfortunate example for this. We need the right diagnosis before we have the right treatment. And this is not only true for rare diseases, this is true for common diseases as well. Now, for rare diseases, we have the exception that 80% of all rare diseases are caused by monogenic causes. And this is what brings the human geneticists into the field, because we have now these technologies to sequence genomes and to see whether or not the patient is being caused by a genetic mutation or genetic changes in it. So basically that comes to the conclusion we have to invest at least at the national level, I think, in technology, in bioinformatics, and in data. So that's a very important point. I think globally across Europe, more or less whole exome sequencing has been established in most of our countries, not all of our countries, but most of it. But the whole exome sequencing only covers like 1 or 2% of the genome. And we solve less than 50% of the patients with rare diseases, what leaves out 15 million Europeans from a care pathway and maybe also from treatments. So we have to do better, and we can do better. And that brings up that we can do genome sequence into the healthcare. And we are fortunate, at least in Germany, that we have a law which allows every patient with a rare disease, which is unsolved, to have the genome sequenced, and the insurance companies have to cover the expenses. So that is a major step forward. And I think that could lead all the other European countries also to have laws in this direction. Now, besides this, we have to develop technologies further. So the current technology is what we call short-read genome sequencing, but we have next generation sequencing technologies already on the market, what we call long-read sequencing technology, which has a major advantage that we can trace the parental origin of mutations, which gives us sometimes a hint of whether or not it could be causative or not. And we can also determine part of the epigenome, and we have a lot of epigenetic variations in our genome, what we call imprinting diseases, imprinting or epigenetic signatures, and so on. I will not go into much detail, but it's really a major step forward what we can do. We should not forget also that these short read technology, we haven't really explored all the indications yet. So we are entering in autoimmune diseases and so on. So in different areas, what we haven't thought about yet, what will be the cause even or guides us with the treatment as well. So summarizing, we need more technology. We need also more data. And data is one thing where the EU has to step in and guide us a bit, because we have to enlarge the data sets. And the EU is doing it with the 1 million genomes projects, with EDERA on the rare diseases, with CanHeal on the cancer field. But we have to move faster, quicker, and in a better way. So we are quite diverse right now with data access. And sometimes we get the impression that data protection is even more important than getting to the right diagnosis for the patients to prevent diseases and to move forward into this. And so the very unfortunate situation, and I think that is true for all of our countries, and more than 95%, that would be my guess, of the data we are generating are not accessible for research purposes, are not accessible to other labs, so they are in data silos. And that is, something we have already. And so Virgil mentioned we have to do smarter. So the data are there, so we don't have any cost with this. We just have to collect them and make them available. So also, we have to improve bioinformatics, as I mentioned before. I had the great pleasure and fortune to guide one of these major European projects, what we call SolveRD, with Holm Gressner together, so solving the unsolved. And we only looked at data for unsolved patients, and just looking at exome data, not even exploring the potential of genomes, we solved 15% in addition to the ones so which have been unsolved. Just bringing the network of bioinformatic experts together, and we only can do this really European-wide because there are so few experts in some of the fields. My final point, and you mentioned this, is how do the patient get access to diagnostics? So when they are in the system, I think it's more or less easier for them, because then they have the experts. The experts are connected, and so. But how do the patients get access? And again, the European Commission made a very smart invention, I would say. These are the European reference networks. So placing the experts in the different countries, saying what are experts? Already this definition, what is an expert? You know, when I asked my internal medicine professor, he said, oh, I'm the expert for all internal medicine rare diseases. Of course, what is not true, we all know. So we have to, and the EU basically really traced this, made it smart, but now we are at a level that we have to extend these ERN, I would say, excellent points to national reference points. And we have more experts than 3 or 4, you know, in at least in larger nations like France, Europe, Germany, Italy, and so on. So we need a joint action for this, what we call the Jardin, combining, bringing together the ERNs and the national networks for this. And we need to do a lot of teaching, I have to say, you know, to the general practitioners to recognize these diseases immediately. Before we, or in addition to this, I think, and I mentioned it before, we need to bring in a new networks of diagnostics, in my opinion, because we are losing all this diagnostic information what we have already generated. And we have to connect them to the Jardin. We have to connect them to the ERNs because the data are there and the data have to be used. And before we don't have this, we cannot really apply all the AI models, what we are really needing. So the combination of genetics, of the imaging thing, of the lab work, of the clinical investigation. And if we apply the AI technologies, I'm pretty sure that treatment will be much faster, will be smarter, will be better, and will be cheaper in the end. So bringing data together will be the clue for all this. And having said this, I'm absolutely optimistic that the rare disease field, as organized as it is already, as the structures we have already, will take the lead or is leading also for the common diseases, which are not so well structured yet for most parts, I think. So that makes me hope, actually, also in difficult times. But as we realized, the scientists are quite nice people. So they love to interact. They love to interact despite all the competition, what is, but we would like to bring things forward. And we love to interact with the patient organization. I have to say, we learned a lot from you guys. Keep on going like this. That's really good. And we learned to work together with politicians over the year. And we cannot make the difference, but politics and we together with the patients, we can. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Rees. I mean, listening to you, it seems that it's an easy job. It's just applying rationality to things, no? But that will need a political willingness, no? And I think that's very good that we are here, no? In the house of the parliament, no? Where they can have this capacity also to decide what to do in the future and where to assign budget. So you have mentioned something, I will say, very important, which is the data silos. And now in theory, we are having some instruments like the networks, the patient registries, projects like 1 million genomes, etc. And in theory, we have also the means, the legal coverage for doing it, and going a bit step forward to the data protection regulation, which is the European Health Data Space regulation, which allows for doing it. But that will take some time, I would say, I am afraid. Especially in genomics, it will take many years until this flow of data is completely covered. No? But so then I hope that many member states will try to run and try to do that before, because it's, as you mentioned, something that it's needed, clearly needed.
The nations are waiting for this. So as you know, Germany is very fragmented. So we have these Bundesländer, what we call, they all have different data protection officers, the data protection rules. And the answer of our Ministry of Health is please wait for the European health data space. So there's some pressure on you to guide us, to guide the nations, because we have to bring the data together or at least make them accessible. So it's not bringing them together in one side, but in a federated system. Thanks. Thanks for this.
Thank you very much again. And now I will turn to Thomas Minten from the University of Leuven, one of the oldest universities in Europe, and who is member also of the Rare Diseases Organization of Belgium, RADIORG, I think it's the acronym. And from your perspective, representing RADIORG, how was the diagnosis journey been for rare diseases patients in Belgium? And especially how has been coordinated at national level? And how do you think, in comparison with other European Union member states, Belgium is located? So please, you have the floor.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for inviting me to talk here. First I want to say also I'm an economist. And as an economist, I like slides, so I have brought some slides. Currently, I'm a newborn screening researcher, so my work is solely on newborn screening. And so I'm a rare disease patient myself as well. I have, as everyone in the rare disease community or most people, my diagnosis was late. So I was 5 years old when I had my first symptoms, and I was 10 years old when I was diagnosed with a rare cancer. And so I'm very happy that this group, this intergroup, is not only about the rare diseases, but also about pediatric cancer and adult cancer, because when I was 10 years old, I was diagnosed and I had a 7-hour surgery, but they couldn't take out all the cancer. So I have been living with cancer ever since. And that has changed a little bit my career trajectory. When the cancer came back many decades later. And so now I'm a newborn screening researcher because I have a rare genetic mutation that caused my cancer to come when I was 5 years old. And I think in the future, it will be part of newborn screening. And then children with mutations such as I had can be prevented from having that cancer. So that's my goal and my dream a little bit. Yes, thank you. And so I've been working on newborn screening for the last couple of years, and that's what I want to talk about today. So I have the first slide is about newborn screening, how it is currently done in Europe. So you may know that every European country has a newborn screening program, but the big problem that is well known and many people have talked about this before is that newborn screening in Europe is done very differently in every country. So you can see from the map, it shows you the number of disorders that are in the newborn screening program in every country. And it varies basically from 2 to 48. I mean, it cannot be a bigger difference than that, I think. And when I first saw this map, I was really puzzled. So I started thinking about why is it so different? And to be honest, I don't really see a good reason for it because genetics is not different from country to country as much to cause these big differences. It's more that in some countries they have some people who at one point decided, okay, let's add more conditions, and in other countries they haven't done that. So it is not rational at all the way that newborn screening is currently done in Europe. And I think that is one really important issue that the European Union can address to harmonize newborn screening across Europe. So yes, the next slide, please, is about one of the diseases that can be picked up with newborn screening, spinal muscular atrophy. I'm not sure if people are familiar with that disease, but it's a very devastating disease. So it causes the motor neurons of children to die, basically, so that they, over time, get paralyzed. And so the connection between the brain and the muscle dies. And so what in 2016 to 2018 became clear is that now that there is a treatment, if you can identify the children with SMA before the symptoms appear, so before they lose power in their muscles, then you can actually stop the disease from occurring. You can, rather than, letting the children be diagnosed when they already have problems, you can diagnose them early and treat them early so that they have normal lives. And so what we have seen is that the introduction of screening for SMA in Europe has really been slow. And I made this graph and where you can compare the adoption of newborn screening for SMA between Europe and the United States. I know it's a bit controversial today to talk about the United States in a good way, but for newborn screening for SMA, it really is a big difference because there they have national guidelines where they recommended to screen for SMA in 2018, and that caused a rather fast adoption of newborn screening by the states. So in the US, newborn screening is regulated at the national level, but the adoption depends on the states. And so it's the states who ultimately decide whether to screen for a disease or not. But because they have guidelines, there the adoption of SMA was a lot quicker. And so I made this comparison between the United States and the European Union. And if we in the European Union followed the same pace of adoption as what they did in the US, we would have diagnosed 1,298 more children early. So I think about this not as being a number, but this being 1,300 children that for most of them, they will face a life in a wheelchair, not being able to walk, whereas when they would have been screened, they would have been walking. And that's a real shame. And I think it's so clear to me that the European Union can really, by installing a committee, by installing a working group that has some kind of authority to make recommendations, that can change a lot. And so one of the problems why currently we are still only at 60% is that there are currently trials ongoing in France, in Spain, in some regions in Italy are also not yet screening. And to me, it seems a bit strange that why does every country need to have their own trial for SMA newborn screening? Why is it not that there can be one big trial for the entirety of Europe, and then we can, based on that, recommend screening for all countries? That seems to be such a big opportunity for the European Union. And then in the next slide, I will show you that I'm not the first one to think that European guidelines are needed. This has been talked about many times before by doctors, by geneticists. There are 5 papers that pretty much say the same thing. There should be a European newborn screening body. The European Union should actively harmonize screening. There should be a European level expert working group. This is all different people saying the same thing. But since 12 years ago, nothing concrete has happened. Still currently, countries are doing their own thing, kind of. And I really think that, and I hope there seem to be really good parliament members currently that are concerned about rare diseases. And this is something that is very concrete, I think, where you can have a big impact and a direct impact as well, because you can directly measure the improvement in screening programs all over the European Union. And so that was my short talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. I mean, it was short but impressive. So congratulations for your view, no, and for your clear calls, no? Probably, I mean, it's a matter of decision at political level whether the famous word subsidiarity will allow us to work together, no, in that type of elements, no, that are fundamental tools, also based on economy of scale, no, not to repeat everything in each member state to decide something. Okay,
So one of the things that I forgot to mention is that I'm in the newborn screening committee in Flanders. So I'm actively involved in the decision-making for 60,000 newborns every year. But I can see that it is really not efficient to do this at such a small level, because we are trying to make the same decisions as all the other countries. And yeah, there need to be some European guidelines, because otherwise everyone's just copying the same type of work. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Excellent. And now I would like to turn to member of the parliament, Vlad Voiculescu, who is member of the Renew Europe and of the Intergroup of Cancer and Rare Diseases. He is one of the champions of this interparliamentary group, and also with an important experience of having been Minister of Health in Romania, which he has a real taste on how this problem is a challenge, no, for all member states from the healthcare and politician perspective. So what EU policies do you think we need to implement to shorten diagnosis time? And do you think should we invest more in diagnostic, in workforce, or which are the elements you think are the priorities?
Thank you so much. And yeah, thank you for having me speak after this amazing gentleman. Actually, I'll see what value added I can bring to the table here. Stina and I are politicians. I see Tilly there as well. So I think we have to look at the bigger picture, and we also have to respond to current events. And Stina was mentioning, she highlighted the funding cuts for the FDA's rare disease programs, which is mostly unfortunate. The gentleman left here said something really commonsensical, and you said rightly, Mr. Moderator, that we should applaud rationality. Even common sense. And I think we do live those days where we need to applaud common sense and rationality and science. And there used to be a time when leaders in the United States would inspire a less united Europe with the words, yes, we can, with a yes, we can mindset, which speaks about the belief that together we can change things through our collective effort. Now I sometimes get the feeling that there's the one heading the government in the US is rather saying, no, you can't, but I alone can. And this is an approach that is feeding fear and discourages initiative and does not insist that the answers are rather with all of us. So, and if we are to be honest, and again, I would refer to something that was said earlier, you mentioned, sir, the discussion with the internal medicine colleague. And honestly, especially if we talk about cancer and childhood cancer and rare diseases, we do have lots of Trumps around here as well. And there are people, sometimes in politics, sometimes in regional politics, sometimes in hospitals, that that would rather say that they have the answers and that are self-sufficient, and that nothing can change, and that the system is broken and that is beyond repair, and that the answers are not to be looked for in cooperation. And I think we are all arguing here for exactly the opposite. I think the answer is exactly in our cooperation, and that the future will be built by those who believe that we actually can. So now to answer to your rather precise question, what should we do in order to get faster diagnosis? I think the answers have been very much in what we've heard from the last two speakers. And I'll just try to recapitulate and also to consider what we can do around here from the European Parliament. The first thing that we can change is not the investment in technology, not the upskilling. We need to do all that. But if we look at the map that the gentleman to my left here showed us, I was embarrassed. Romania had the number of 2. And that's not about technology that we have. That's not about the skills that we have in the country. It's more about rules and legislation and the political will. So I think this is something that we need to change. And there were 2 screenings for newborns that Romania is doing right now, which is, again, embarrassing. One of them is one that I've introduced back in 2016. It's a hearing screening for newborns. And that's because a patient advocate came to my office. We didn't know each other. And she told me her personal story of her daughter who was born with no hearing. And it took her and lots of doctors years until they realized that the little one was actually not hearing and there was nothing else wrong with her. So they went to Boston, United States, to get a really expensive implant in order to partially solve the problem. But the girl still lives with that problem nowadays. And it took me 5 months as a minister, with all the political will that I had as a minister, to implement the screening in Romania back then. So it takes lots of time, and but this is something that we need to do. And the first thing that maybe we should do, because there are enough studies that we've seen in the previous presentation, showing that there needs to be a European approach, and that there is enough evidence that we should do that, maybe as an intergroup, and we do have an intergroup on cancer, childhood cancer, and rare diseases. Maybe we should write to all the governments. Maybe this is one of the things that we should do immediately as medical organizations, as patient organizations, and together with the intergroup in the European Parliament. Maybe we should write to all of them, and maybe we'll also get some answers, and maybe we can communicate on that as well. So this is a practical thing that we can do right away. Then diagnostic technology, obviously, is something we need to invest in. Data, this is less something that we need to invest, but rather something that we need to be smart about, or not be less smart about, I'll put it nicely, as we are right now. And this was the first time when I heard 95%. So this is staggering to me. Losing basically for science, for scientific research, 95% of the data. I thought it's in that realm, but not that high. Upskilling and a lot of teaching, I think they both go hand in hand, and we can only do that as Europe, or at least in regions. And I know that some regional corporations in Europe that do really well. Maybe we need to consider also cultural, I don't know, the Nordics might work better with the Nordics and the Southerners better with the Southerners. That's not as important. Important is that we do have a European strategy, and that we also trace that. And most of all, greater cooperation, and it was mentioned again before, the European reference networks. I think the European reference networks, and I know some of us here, some of you have been personally involved in their setting up. So thank you a lot for that personally. It's amazing. And I think the European reference networks and the cross-border healthcare directive and the cooperation regulation between for social security. I think these are some of the most generous political acts in Europe, in the history of the European Union. I think we need to build on that. And if you follow the hearings of the current commissioner, Commissioner Varhelyi, this was one of the specific questions I've raised on behalf of Stina and me and the colleagues in the Renew group, of whether the current commissioner will support the ERNs and the further cooperation. And the answer was very clear. And I got the same answer in private as well. So not only that, we do not expect the ERNs to lose any funding, but the opposite. We expect the ERNs to be expanded. And I think I hope that's clear for everyone, and we won't accept anything else in the SANT committee. Thank you so much for this amazing event and for the amazing contributions.
Thank you, Mr. Voiculescu. So it's really a pleasure to listen to you, to how a politician with experience has a clear mind on what should be done. So thank you very much. And now we are a bit late in the process, but I think that it's so interesting, but we are listening so that it's impossible to speed up, but I will ask the next speaker, please, to try to keep the time. Now we will turn to the next session, which will be about the second main challenge in rare diseases, which is how to develop an access to treatments, which is a major matter of the problem of the people suffering rare diseases. As you know, less than 5% of the rare diseases are having currently a treatment, an effective treatment. And it's often even having this percentage unequal and depends very much on the member states, on the famous description of the postal code. So it's like a lottery, it was presented. So then if you are lucky, you will have access, but even for the rest, for the 95%, there is no treatment now. So then it's very important to see how we can speed up this and how we can have better, more efficient studies and ways to develop and to access also treatment. For that, we have, first we will start with Sébastien Honoré, co-founder of the Cure Law Foundation. And for your personal experience as father of a child with the disease, what steps have you taken to advance development? How do you get the information to better access treatment for rare diseases? And what should be the role of the cooperation at the European Union in that?
Thank you for giving me the stage here today. It is a real pleasure to be speaking, and thank you for the invitation, Stina. So, in the summer of 2023, I had my boy, Walter. He's a beautiful boy, but he was born with a very devastating and rare disease called Lowe syndrome. It affects 1 in 500,000 individuals. It's ultra rare. It significantly affects multiple organs. It affects his brain. It affects his eyes. He will go blind at some point. And most devastatingly, it affects his kidneys. The disease was first characterized in 1956. It's almost 70 years to this date. But Walter has no disease-modifying treatment. And this is despite the fact that most of these kids do not see past their 30th birthday. So, as an economist and also as a father, I have decided to devote my entire life to bringing this treatment, not only to Walter, but to all the kids with Lowe syndrome and a closely related disorder called dense disease type 2. What makes this journey particularly frustrating is that we are at the cusp of a breakthrough. We have all the puzzles, the pieces in the puzzle to actually develop a meaningful treatment. We have animal models. We know how the disease progressed through natural history studies. We have access to breakthrough organoid models, patient registries. We know the disease pathways. We know, of course, the responsible gene responsible for the disease. So why? Why, after nearly 70 years, hasn't there been developed a treatment? Science is tough. I think most of you will reckon this in this room. But this cannot just be scientific. You know, we're living in an era where children who was dealt some very unfortunate cards in the lottery of life are running around in playgrounds now, thanks to breakthroughs in proteomics, genomics, and a lot of other omics. No, the real barrier must be in another omics. It lies within economics. And so, to understand this, I think we should put ourselves in the shoes of a biotech CEO for a minute. And I think it will become clear for you why. So, when you need to do or start drug development, you need to ask yourself a simple question. And it all comes down to a simple economic equation. The probability of success must outweigh the cost to potential revenue. That's it. It's rational. And there's another thing to it. So when you do the economic analysis and the theory behind it, you will also find that as your patient numbers dwindle, the riskiness increases in your project. Why is this important? Because when you want to fundraise to actually develop a meaningful treatment, you cannot get it because the investors require a large risk premium. And there you have it, the economic recipe for the orphan drug paradox. So for rare disease therapies, we actually have favorable factors in our hand. The probability of success is high in many gene therapies, upwards of 80% we have seen. And the development costs are relatively low because the clinical trials require a low amount of patients. But still, the low number of patients remains, or it enables that these drug developments remain economically unviable due to risk. So a new question now emerges. So how do we design policies that can spur drug development for ultra-rare diseases? I think the solution and the answer lies in creating a balance of economic incentives and support structures. And today I will highlight 4 key elements for this. First, we must create patient-agnostic revenue streams. When the markets are small, biotechs cannot rely only on the revenue captured by treating the patients. So how can we enable revenue that not relies on this? Transferable vouchers is assets which can be sold from small biotechs developing ultra-rare diseases to large pharmaceutical companies. We had that in the past in the US, and I say past because in January 2025, these were removed. And that left rare disease research in a very dark space now. And EU could implement this. And the timing is right now. And you know what the good thing is? It will not cost you a dime. Because what we are essentially doing is we are redistributing income from large pharma to small pharma to enabling these drugs. Second, and as we also heard, we need to reduce the cost and the time of patient identification. We need to implement widespread genetic testing of newborns, not only for the patients and for the outcomes of these patients, but also from a purely cost perspective, because that makes clinical trials less of a burden, enabling biotechs to overcome the hurdles of clinical trial recruitment. And third, we need innovative funding mechanisms that is designed to de-risk the risk inherently in these drug developments. We need public-private partnerships with grant matching programs to effectively share the risk between the governments and the industry. The TGM Foundation Teleton model, where there is a one-to-one grant matching if you're investigating a rare disease, is a good model for this. We need it on a larger EU scale. And we are very proud to be collaborating in our efforts in bringing a therapy to life with Foundation Teleton in this. But also public megafunds. Public megafunds that can invest in equity to drive this forward. Because what the good thing about a public megafund is that when you combine a lot of therapies under one umbrella, you diversify risk. You decrease the risk, which is good because we can bring more therapies to the people. And then fourth and finally, we need a coordinated EU. And I think this intergroup that has been set in motion now is immensely important in this because we need a unified EU market. It means harmonizing regulatory requirements across member states. We need to establish centralized patient registries and creating standardized reimbursement pathways to ensure access for ultra-rare disease treatments. You know, a fragmented market of small patients can only become viable in a unified Europe. To some of the things that I've highlighted here today may be a little cynical, but we need to acknowledge that this is economic forces our work. This is how the system works. And rather than trying to change the fundamental rules of drug development, we need to work within them to create the economic incentives required to solve the orphan drug paradox. You know, I think we're at a point now where we can say science has done its part. Now it's time to make prudent economic reforms to bring these treatments to patients who desperately need them, including my son, Walter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. I think that you have mentioned some of the elements that are right now under discussion, no? Related with the pharmaceutical package, the CMA, and all the discussion about what should be the best way, no? to identify push incentives so that the treatments at the end are developed. No? So hopefully we will find the way, no? To have something that it's useful at the end. So now let me turn to Stefano Benvenuti, Head of Public Affairs and Market Access of Fondazione Teleton. So Fondazione Teleton has been the first non-profit organization to hold marketing authorization for a treatment. And it's really impressive, and it will be very good, very nice to know which type of challenge you have to pass over to reach this authorization.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you very much to the MIPs that invited and hosted this event. And thanks for the question. I think that all the points that Sebastian made are very exemplified by our story. Because usually the decision whether to invest or not in the development of a therapy is taken before starting investing. But once you are on the market, once your drug is approved, once it's reimbursed, in principle, there is where you start having your revenues, right? So no companies should ever exit the market until when they can make revenue out of product. But this is not what happened with the gene therapy ex vivo that's for ADHD, which is a primary immunodeficiency that was developed in our institute and then out-licensed to in that industry. First GSK, then to Orchard Therapeutics. So the story started in 2000. We treated the first patients in 2000. It was a patient Palestinian patient. It was treated in Jerusalem at an Israeli hospital. That was the first patient treated. 10 years after the treatment was working, we have treated more patients. And so GSK, large pharmaceutical industry, came, said, well, we could have a deal. We could bring this to the market. And we were very happy because that was exactly what we thought the model could be, right? The academia develops until a certain point with the risk. the development of the product, and then this is passed to industry that their job is to bring therapies to patients. But then GSK managed to get the approval in 2016, and that was the first ex vivo gene therapy approved worldwide, so very breakthrough innovation. Then they negotiated the price in Italy because the product can be administered only in an Italian hospital due to very specific technical aspects. It's a fresh product, cannot be shipped far from where it's manufactured. And so we hope, at that time, we were celebrating this as a very successful story, like the end of the story. We are done. You know, patient will have access to this product forever or for a long period of time. Well, that was not the case because 1 year after, GSK decided to divest from all the rare disease space. They passed this product to another company, Archer Therapeutics, that some year after decided also to divest from this product because the business case was not there. Basically, the cost of keeping the product in the market was higher than the revenues generated by the product itself. And so at that point, we were facing a big decision. What do? We have a therapy that works for a very, very rare disease, but it works. And it's basically curative. It's treatment once in a lifetime, and then you don't experiment the symptoms of the disease. And so we couldn't really accept this therapy to be taken off the market, which means, you know, patient will not have access anymore. And so we decided to make a big step for a charity to become a marketing authorization holder. We had to change our statute because we start selling drug, even if it's not profitable. But the fact is that we became, and we had to set up a whole system of pharmacovigilance, you know, all the requirements that every pharmaceutical company needs to have to keep a product on the market. So we realized that the reason why they decided to close, well, that was this decision, and we had to rescue this product is because it's not profitable. Doesn't mean that you have no earnings. It's really that you're losing money keeping this on the market because all the burden of the regulations, the fees you have to pay to the regulatory authorities, all these things makes you spend more than what you earn selling the product. And so we're committed to keep it on the market because we're committed to patients, so that our job is to give answers to patients, but it's clear that the system as it is not working. So the business model is not just a business model for for-profit organization, even for not-for-profit as we are. We would just try to strike a sustainable balance, you know, the income that pays for the cost, and this is not there yet. So we need to improve. We need to change something in the system. And I think that the discussion that there was around the pharmaceutical package basically did not consider the ultra-rare diseases. It was much focused, on rare disease, but as a broad concept, forgetting that there are some among the rare diseases, the ultra-rare, that are really not, there is no way to design a sustainable business model with the current regulation and situations. I have one slide that I wanted to show. This is, on the left, you have the prevalence the incidence of one disease that we have developed another gene therapy for. And this was in partnership with an industry, then they gave us back the program, and we now filed end of last year to the EMA for having the approval of this gene therapy. If you see the numbers there, we expect to have 1 to 4 patients in Germany, 1 to 2 patients in Italy, 0 to 2 patients in Spain. So those are the numbers. Per year, we will treat probably less than 10 patients. There are no business models that stand those numbers currently. And if you see the graph on the right, the high bar on the left is the number of disease that affect less than 1 person in a million, which means that this is not an isolated case. Those ultra-rare diseases are the vast majority of the rare diseases. So if we do not figure out how to make this sustainable, we will not have development for thousands of diseases. We will not have therapy for thousands of diseases. So we are here because we think we can help. And the last things I want to say, the very first things I want to ask to our politicians is, do you think we can really go and negotiate a price and distribute a therapy in 27 member states when we have 0 to 2 patients per year in that state? This is what is in the pharmaceutical package, right? That you should access all the member states to have additional incentives. But with those numbers, it's not even sure for patients. It's not safe to go and get treated with a very innovative, complex therapy as it is an ex vivo gene therapy in a center where they treat 1 patient every 5 years. That's not ideal. We need to centralize the treatment in few centers, but this requires to facilitate patient mobility across border. And we still have a high barrier in patient mobility. So what we really need is that it becomes a real right of European citizens to go and get treated where the treatment is available. So once the treatment is approved by EMA, and now with the HTA regulation, possibly also have a positive opinion from the joint clinical assessment, I think there are no reason why a country should refuse the mobility of a patient. Now we have the HTA regulation. Let's leverage that to make cross-border mobility of patients a reality. Thanks.
Thank you, Stefano. I mean, you have touched all elements as Sebastian did that right now under discussion, no? But what it's clear that we need to think a bit out of the box, no? For these cases, no? That we cannot apply same rules for all medicaments. So yeah, there are many. Thank you very much. And now we have my dear member of the parliament, Steen Bos, who is one of the champions of this new intergroup of cancer and rare diseases. And we will ask her about her work here. How do you think the legislation could help to bring more therapies in patients, and what role can have the public-private partnerships and a new way to develop clinical trials at European level?
First of all, again, I think both your stories are amazing and very informative to understand the environment that we're actually in. And I'm in the same situation as you, Vlad. It is difficult to come after so distinguished examples of what is going on and what are the issues at stake. But let me try anyway. People who know me also know that, yes, I'm a Dane, but more and more so before that, I'm a European. And especially working in this field encourages me more and more to think exactly like that, because I could not agree more. These rare diseases, and of course the very rare, the specifically rare, that goes without explaining, but even the rare needs us to work together. Look, in my country, a rare disease would be like 2 situations annually. A very rare disease would be like 1 in every 5 or 10 years. It's just logical, as you also said. I mean, this is where working together as Europeans becomes visibly logical. So that's the first thing. And I think, you know, Vlad and I will together for the next 4 years sit with all these issues, soon the Critical Medicines Act, and then the pharma packages in 2 elements. And after that, I'm sure there will be more pieces of legislation coming along. And we will, of course, be guided by this fact. We already, I mean, we represent east and west, north and south, male, female, different generations. And that all adds up to, we understand that we have to deal with some of these issues in a very different way, but we think European. And that is the entrance to solving many of these issues. So with all we've heard here, and with all I know from many meetings and conversations with you, when we address this, you both of it said it, it is at the end of the day, access to capital. So access to the people who will invest in these areas is at the core of what we need to look for. So we, as lawmakers, need to understand what are the hinders, what are the difficult areas, how do we understand the pipeline of investing in, for example, a drug in this area. That we need to understand very, very deeply, and then we start the lawmaking. And as I see it, it has to become a combination of de-risking, taking the risk out, converting the risk either to portfolios that are guaranteed or even grant supported, grant/equity supported. If we can do this, and I'm sure we can, because I mean, all the elements are there to do it. If we can do this, then we can also make business cases as yours feasible and doable. On top of the clear financial things is the very practical things. That's the cross-border trials. That is making sure that, exactly like you said, it is not safe, obviously, to have a treatment in the Rigshospitalet in Copenhagen that would happen every 5 years. No way. It's not safe. It's not the right financial way to do it. So that would have to happen, now I'm just saying something, in Madrid. So we have to make sure that people then from Denmark, but not only from Denmark, also from Romania, also from Bulgaria, can travel to Madrid, and that we have some form of financing this. And this is what I think Vlad and I and other people, Tilly and others, this is what we will have to sit down and think about in very, very practical terms and say, okay, this is the group that we're talking about, this is the way that we want to do it, and then get it done. And some of it would be by legislation, some of it would be by the, committing the willing. I think we will see that happening a lot more in the years to come. But I'm very eager to make sure that commitment of the willing is a mix, not only like, north and south or east and west. It has to be a very, very good combination of European countries. I think these are all the ingredients, and I look forward to communicating more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Boss. You have mentioned the two elements. One is fundamental, which is how to cover the cross-border healthcare. No, we have two instruments now, which is the famous cross-border healthcare directive, which is, I will say, it was a nice try. But we have also the Social Security regulation. And I will say that it's not used, can be used, but it's not used, or it's used just by a very limited proportion of the patient or the member states, because either or they don't know how to do it, or but I think that also the perfection of this instrument could be very, very important.
Very good.
So now, thank you very much to the three of you. And now we will move to the last session of the trilogue we had today, which is about holistic care and support for rare diseases patients. As you know, as has been said before by Adela, so the disabilities in rare disease patients are very frequent. 8 out of 10 people are having a disability. And we are always talking about healthcare, access to treatment, early diagnosis, which is very important. But there are other domains that are fundamental for the daily life of patients and families with a rare disease. And it's the recognition of disabilities, the receiving the appropriate care, and also the support to other domains that are related with the disability, the capacity to work, the access to appropriate means to have a work that is adapted to the people, and also all the repercussion in mental health. Many domains that are related not only with the treatment of the disease, but also with the holistic approach to the problem of that rare disease patients are suffering. So now we have 3 speakers for that. First one, you know her already, which is Adela. So now we will ask Adela about your personal experience and your what is the daily life with for a patient with a rare disease and a disability, and what are the main barriers do you face in your everyday life? Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. So to provide more context, I am a person living with a rare disease myself. I live with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a rare genetic condition affecting the connective tissues, along with other comorbidities that often go hand in hand. Living with EDS is associated conditions means living with constant injuries, chronic pain, fatigue, limited mobility, and potentially life-threatening vascular complications, among many other complex and persistent issues that affect the entire body and significantly impact the quality of life. And living with a rare disease and disability presents challenges on multiple levels, not only physically, but also logistically, psychologically, socially, and financially. Many aspects of the conditions are not immediately visible, as I already mentioned in the opening speech, but they have a profound effect on the quality of life and social interactions. However, I'm left to manage everything entirely on my own with no support. There is no causal treatment for my condition, as it's the case for 94% of people living with rare diseases. So it's only about trying to do everything we can to achieve the highest quality of life possible. But this is not something that we can do alone. It requires a collective effort and systemic support, and most of all, a holistic approach that is still lacking. Currently, I have no access to any of the state-funded support I should be entitled to receive. And, sometimes it feels as though the system is designed to let us deteriorate rather than improve. And I am getting worse, and my community is getting worse, not only because of the natural progression of the condition, but also due to the complete lack of adequate support, which forces us to push through at a great personal cost. Coordinating my healthcare and social care and managing my own condition is essentially a full-time job on top of my professional responsibilities, and it requires constant phone calls to clinics and hospitals, searching for the right specialists and arranging essential medical care, prescriptions, medications, mobility aids. The administrative burden is immense, especially when applying for social support. As I mentioned, we completely fall through the cracks of the social support. It means spending your life justifying your condition over and over again, explaining, proving, and reproving its impact. And yet, even after all of that, it often feels as it's never enough. And you are made to feel as though your condition cannot be possibly that serious. You are denied the support you need. And the cycle starts all over again, without any certainty that after all of this effort and paperwork will ever lead to the assistance you are rightfully entitled to. One of the biggest issues in healthcare and social care today is the absence of multidisciplinary approach and multidisciplinary teams. This means that all care, health and social, community care, coordination falls entirely on people living with the condition themselves. Care is scattered across different locations. Some individuals must travel across the country or even abroad just to access the specialist they need. And given the complexity of our condition, follow-up care spans many different medical fields. Yet each person must independently track down specialists, schedule appointments, and coordinate their own treatment. And this, if you imagine, is an overwhelming burden considering our already limited energy and the constant strain of symptoms. And on top of that, we must still have enough strength and energy left for everyday responsibilities, work, and personal life. Yet, healthcare and social system often fail to recognize the full impact of these conditions. Another serious issue that was already mentioned here is the lack of mental health support for people living with rare diseases. And exhaustion is an inevitable part of life with a rare disease, especially when you are left to manage everything alone. Yet mental health is rarely acknowledged in this context. And many people with rare diseases now live with post-traumatic stress disorders, not just due to the long and exhausting journey to diagnosis, but also because of the medical gaslighting they experienced. And many hesitate to seek professional help because they have spent years not being believed. Living with a rare disease and disability represents also a significant financial burden, as our colleagues mentioned. The cost of daily functioning, medical travel, accessible transportation, assistive devices, mobility aids, these are very often entirely out-of-pocket expenses. And considering that people with rare diseases and disabilities already face significant barriers to employment, this can lead to profound socioeconomic impact. So personally, I am employed and professionally active, and I was very happy to hear my colleagues whose personal situation led them to this career path. And I can say personally that my rare disease led me to the path that I'm on today. Professionally, I'm a medical translator and interpreter. And beside that, all of my professional activities now are focused in the rare disease field. And I think that the personal experience that we bring to this field is invaluable. So thank you for that. And I am professionally active, but just thanks to reasonable accommodations. And I cannot stress enough how important these accommodations are for people living with rare diseases and disabilities. Because without the option to work from home, maintaining any professional activity for me would be incredibly difficult, if not impossible, or not to the extent that I'm able to do today. And for me, the key factors that make employment viable are flexible working hours and remote work. And without these accommodations, I wouldn't be able to participate in the workforce at all. And, you know, I like to say that these aren't impossible demands. This is what the community of people living with rare diseases and disabilities very often ask for. And COVID-19 proved us that remote and flexible work arrangements are feasible because they were arranged overnight when the pandemic started. And they should not be seen as special privileges, but essential measures in inclusivity in employment. And so what would be a game changer? There is a clear and urgent care, a need for holistic care and its better coordination. Rare diseases very often lack this coordination, and people are sent from one specialist to another, undergoing unnecessary tests and procedures that ultimately do not improve the care. And the same we see in social support. They don't even know where to find the information in the first place and how to access it. And this, of course, places a heavy burden not only on the person itself, but as we heard, on the system. And so a crucial solution would be the interaction of care coordinators, professionals who could help people efficiently organize the access to the right care, holistic care, health and social, and this would drastically improve outcomes and alleviate much of the unnecessary burden and stress placed on individuals living with rare diseases. Because right now we are left to navigate an unstructured and inefficient system alone, and this solution is not sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you, Adela. So you have shown clearly that the holistic approach is what you will need. And I think that in all member states, we have similar problems related with the social and healthcare coordination. So it's like a extended disease, not a rare disease, but a major problem, no? And also related with the reasonable accommodation, as you mentioned, that many enterprises are forgetting about that, even important institutions, no? So then now we will turn to our next speaker. We have heard from Adela how important holistic care is, but how can we ensure holistic care becomes a reality? And what are the building blocks, do you think, and the challenges to achieve? Just to mention that Karsten van den Dingart is one of the European Patient Advocacy Group members of ERCnet, one of the 24 European reference networks, in this case for rare nephrologic diseases. Please, go ahead.
Thank you for the introduction. So indeed, I'm a patient advocate as well as a policy advisor at our local hospital, University Hospital in Ghent. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude that there's indeed a session about holistic care, because for me, it doesn't make any sense to invest a lot in diagnosis and in treatments, making sure that patients with rare diseases are or stay alive, whereas they don't feel alive. So I do think that this session is of critical importance, that patients with rare diseases, they should be alive, they should feel alive, and we should be able to participate in our society, because otherwise it doesn't make sense to spend millions and millions of euros just in treatments and diagnosis. So I'm very happy that this session is taking place today. Well, to make holistic care a reality for patients with rare diseases, I think it's important to firstly clearly define what actually holistic care really means. Because holistic care is a very inherently broad and very complex concept that has been often discussed, but not really well understood. So at its core, holistic care refers to an approach of care that addresses all patients' needs. The physical needs, the emotional needs, the mental needs, the social needs, and even the spiritual needs. In other words, holistic care means that we have to look beyond the clinical needs of a patient with rare diseases. And we should provide also non-clinical support, such as assistance in employment, education, social integration, and so on. However, how to organize holistic care is very difficult because it's neither practical nor fair to place this full responsibility on the healthcare sector, on healthcare providers. Just to give you an example, some weeks ago, I asked endocrinologists at our hospital whether they would be able to spend 10 minutes during their consultation just talking about non-clinical things like education and so on with their patients. And they said that it's very hard and very tough to spend a lot of time to really talk about non-clinical aspects with patients. It's the same thing when I'm talking to other policy advisor colleagues, when I'm advocating for holistic care, the first thing that pops in their minds is actually, well, this is going to cost us a lot of money and it's going to request a lot of time to really provide holistic care. And that's a problem because it does not have to be. There are already now a lot of best practices currently in place in Europe or throughout Europe that provide evidence that holistic care is indeed possible for everyone. One of the biggest obstacles that we face when we want to provide holistic care is that there are no guidelines or not really feasible guidelines, not adaptable guidelines. And I think the European reference networks, they have an extremely important value here because they are not really a research institution. They are just there as a network to improve the health care for all patients with rare diseases, which means that they have the right mindset to make sure that patients feel alive and that the patients receive the support or have access to the kind of support that they really need. So that being said, about the European reference networks, I think they are extremely important also when it comes to providing holistic care. So to overcome these challenges, the European reference networks, they have to develop guidelines and care pathways based on fundamental principles that are flexible, adaptable, and feasible across diverse healthcare systems. And as such, we should be able to bridge the gap between the current existing evidence that holistic care is indeed necessary and the real-world implementation of holistic care. Because to be completely honest, the current guidelines that have been developed about holistic care, they are not cost-effective, they are not feasible to implement. And I think it's the innovative aspect of the European reference networks is that we can develop guidelines and care pathways that are really implementable throughout Europe so that eventually the patients can receive or experience a real-life impact. In this regard, well, I will have to say something else. So I already told you that it's not possible to place the full responsibility of holistic care at healthcare providers because it's just not feasible to do this. Now, the other way to go around this problem is that we actually, in Europe, we do have the expertise to provide holistic care. We have expertise in social support at our social networks. We have expertise in educational outcomes and issues with our educational support services and so on. So I do think that we have a lot of social partners, and this really the social fabric of Europe is in our social partners. We do have a lot of social partners that can contribute to holistic care. And I think the main problem or the main solution to provide holistic care is to ensure that the social partners are integrated into our healthcare system, and not that the healthcare providers are placed with the full responsibility to provide holistic care. That being said, in this regard, Jardin's efforts to integrate the ERNs into the national healthcare systems is of crucial importance, because without proper integration, the valuable work that has been done by the ERNs right now remains disconnected of the real world healthcare services that has been or is experienced by patients with rare diseases. However, for Jardin's work to be truly effective, I do believe that we must go a step further. We should also engage the social partners and to integrate the social partners into the ERNs, into the national healthcare systems, to ensure that there's a fully integrated support system, not just for healthcare, but also for all aspects of a patient's life and the life domains. Therefore, I strongly believe that in the coming years, especially in Europe, because I'm really fond of Europe, I'm a true European, I do believe that we have the unique opportunity to reshape our healthcare services, our healthcare structure for people with rare diseases. And by moving towards a truly integrated healthcare system where medical support, social support, practical support, where all these services work together, we can really break down the barriers and ensure that all patients have access to holistic care. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carsten. So it's clear that it's a component, an element, the holistic care that we need to integrate, no? Not like a marginal thing, but as a core element, no, of how to address rare diseases. And finally, we have the Member of Parliament, Tilly Metz. She's member of the Greens and one of the champions of the Intergroup on Cancer and Rare Diseases of the European Parliament, and member of the SAN Committee, the new SAN Committee. And we would like to ask her, how do you think EU policies could ensure that rare disease patients are receiving adequate support in their daily life, in mental health, in addressing their disabilities, and also how the EU disability strategy should look like in that regards?
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very honored and happy to be here. And I took already a lot of notes, a lot of inspiration from all the speakers. So thank you very much for that. What is clear that speaking of a holistic approach, a lot of patients, and we heard that also with all that they have to experience, and also their families experience also mental health issues, for example. So, and we know, everybody knows in the meantime, the connection between physical and mental health. It is complex, we also know that, but we know that it influences each other. So, and factors affecting mental health can be both positive and negative, of course. And it was really very interesting and also very well explained as from Adela and also from Carsten, how important to have this holistic approach. I strongly believe also on my side that the psychosocial model of mental health, so that the environment, the social environment, the relationships and other factors can strengthen positive mental health and also build resilience. For example, access to adequate care, good living conditions, and also fulfilling job, and also the conditions in order to be able to work have a very clear impact. Even when you live with a disease, this positive environment and good care can be powerful and of course improve your well-being. On the other hand, when you live in isolation and when you have these daily struggles that were so well explained also by Adler, and the lack of social support that can really worsen, of course, mental health and have an impact also on the healing process. So that is why it is so important that mental health of patients with rare diseases is supported and prioritized at the EU level and also at national level. But not only patients, families, and carers are equally important, and as their mental health is often also negatively affected. So often, and especially with rare diseases, we have this long journey in order to get a diagnosis. And even some patients, and a lot of patients with rare diseases, remaining undiagnosed or even misdiagnosed. And that can be mentally and emotionally, and it was also beforehand so good explained, draining, both for the patients and the carers. We saw before the lack of screening, and I found that very interesting. I'm coming from Luxembourg, and that was this little red point in Luxembourg. And I heard it yesterday on another topic on the HPV, where the screening is lacking, but also when concerning the SMA. And thank you for raising my awareness also there. So it's a rich country, Luxembourg, but nevertheless, we see that there is not enough screening. So it's a lot about political will that must be there, and also adapted programs, and also regarding training. But all this to say, this whole long journey to diagnosis often then gives a feeling of uncertainty, of loneliness, and then comes, and again, I must quote you, what Adela said, there comes the financial burden and the difficulties to access to care, and then comes also the social stigma and lack of awareness. I myself was during 11-year chair of the multiple sclerosis in Luxembourg, which is not a rare disease, but nevertheless, and the social stigma, I really felt it so strongly with the people affected with MS, because often they even did not dare to say at their workplace that they have multiple sclerosis. Still today, I'm not speaking 20 years ago. Huh? So all these are definitely negative factors impacting mental health. And in order to tackle it, both the EU and the member state need to focus on improving access to good health, quality healthcare, as this is the basic need to ensure that lives of patients with rare disease improve. And I really liked also what Karsten said. It's not only about making that people stay alive, it's really also that they feel alive, that they feel part of a society. And another area I'm working on since a long time is the disability issues. And in many cases, people with rare disease have different disabilities which they have to cope with. So there really, we can say that rare diseases and disability also meet. Many people with rare diseases live with motor, sensorineural, or intellectual impairments, and face serious challenges in their activities in daily living. For example, also including personal care and other essential tasks. So in this context, unfortunately, obtaining an adequate and also timely disability assessment remains a major obstacle for people living with rare diseases. So surveys and personal stories show that patients with rare diseases face it inadequate also disability assessment in more than 30% of the cases. And many of them don't receive any assessment at all. A big demand towards a post-2025 disability strategy is to improve also the recognition of the disability assessment across Europe, but also to increase the quality and coverage of the assessment in general. And we need also to have this harmonization. You know, I'm dreaming, we spoke already today of, I have a dream, but I have so many dreams regarding more inclusion. We have now indeed this disability, EU disability cards. It's nice, it's good. It allows you to go to the theater, to have a specific parking place. I mean, it's nice when you travel as a tourist. But what I'm dreaming of is when you travel throughout Europe, that your disabilities are immediately recognized, that in any country you travel to work, not only for holidays and to go to the theater, but also when you go there for work, that it is recognized that you have the specific needs and that you have a European disability card and right to the access to social rights. I know that is a long way to go, but that is what Europe should be there for. And if you don't have any vision, better not be a politician on the other hand also. So the lack of inclusive assessment and assessment that responds to actual needs of people result in worse access to essential support and services, negatively affecting then the well-being of people. So the EU has resources with funding for structural reforms to support member states and improving the national system. Recently, the European Commission did that for Belgium, Greece, Latvia, and Lithuania, but more needs to be done there. Another, and I spoke already about it, is access to quality employment. So people living with rare diseases, like most people in general, are eager to work and often have the capacity to do so, provided the workplace and work schedule, and Adela mentioned it, are adapted to the specific challenges generated by their condition, care, and treatment. Equally, their family members, often the main carers, need a tailored support. In an Eurodis survey that asked both patients and family members, we found out that 70% of people had to stop or reduce their professional work, while almost 60% were absent from work for a long period of time. And the unemployment rate for people with rare diseases is 3% versus in the other population 6.1%. So all this is a lost opportunity, of course, for the people, but also for the societies and for the economy. So to sum up, mental health needs support across the board, but we have to do more, we have to do better than only focusing on service for mental health. I'm finishing. I'm finishing. And changes are needed in the system. When I speak of the system that needs really to enable and to empower and to give better support. And employment, we cannot lose sight of people who live with rare disease, but they can work, and we have to create the empowerment environment in order that they can do so. And I'm finishing on that. I could still say a lot of things, but I'm finishing here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I am afraid that we have to close the meeting because the meeting is needed for other EP activity. So I don't know if we will have at least 1 minute to close, each of you. Please, Agnes. Agnes Chair is a member of the Social and Economic Committee, and she is the rapporteur of the last opinion of the ESC on rare diseases and a champion on rare diseases in the committee.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And I have only one possibility to tell you that today we celebrate Rare Disease Day together. I call on the members of the European Parliament to support 2026 to be the year of rare disease patients and support continuing cooperation at EU level on the European Action Plan to achieve our common goals for the benefit of rare disease patients, their families, and all of us. Faster, quicker, better, smarter, and cheaper, as Dr. Rees told us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Agnes. Just one final remark by Virginie.
Thank you. So I'll be super quick because I know they need the room. I just really wanted to say thank you to everyone. Obviously, thank you to the MEPs for hosting us. It's very much appreciated. I think we really can feel the momentum, the energy, and we need to jump on the wagon of that intergroup that really giving us a great opportunity. So we will collaborate, ask us also the patient community, whatever you need, because we will be there with the evidence, the data, there to contribute and to make a difference with all of you. So thanks again, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Eugenie, and please.
I'll make it also short. I just want to make a point. I wanted to give all of you who have been speaking a little sentence, but I'll make it very short. We will listen. We hear you loud and clear. Keep it coming. Make sure that, you also push us. We will also ask, and let's cross borders together. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a big deal. Yeah. It was